Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see the summary of The Bard, a Pindaric Ode by Thomas Gray. Thomas Gray wrote this ode in 1755. Here he depicts the ruthless torment which King Edward I unleashed upon the poets. And Bard means poet. And since this poem he wrote in the Pindaric form, he kept the title as The Bard, a Pindaric Ode. Thomas Gray is a famous English poet, scholar, and letter writer. He is well known for his elegy written in a country churchyard. Now let's see what he says here. Ruin seize thee, ruthless king, confusion on thy banners wait. Though fanned by conquest crimson wing, they mock the air with idle state. Helm, nor hauberk's twisted mail, nor even thy virtues tyrant shall avail, to save thy secret soul from nightly fears, from Cambria's curse, from Cambria's tears. Such were the sounds that over the crested pride of the first Edward scattered wild dismay, as down the steep of Snowdon's shaggy side he wound with toilsome march his long array. Stout Gloucester stood aghast in speechless trance. To arms, cried Mortimer, and couched his squaring lance. Thomas Gray tells the story of the last surviving bard of Wales who, in a fit of despair and anger, curses the English King Edward I and predicts his downfall. The poet curses the ruthless king that he will be ruined and his dynasty and ancestors will go through many dark nights for his deeds. His flag, which is crimson wing, now flying, is stained with the blood of innocence. The king assumes that his win over the execution brought him an idle state, but it is so wrong. The poet says that neither his spear nor his shield, the virtues of heaven, can protect his soul from the fearful nights. His soul will be doomed because of the curses and tears of the Cambrian people for the suffering he brought upon them. The king has done wrong to the poets that the bard's curse will be there moving in the air. As the army comes down from Snowdon's shaggy side, the bard's curse becomes clearer. His father-in-law comes to hear the bard's curse and is struck with fear and becomes speechless. The army captain senses something awful, calls the army and takes a spear when he hears the bard's curse. Stanza 2. On a rock whose haughty brow frowns over old convoy's foaming flood, robed in the sable garb of woe, with haggard eyes the poet stood, loose his beard and hoary hair streamed like a meteor to the troubled air, and with the master's hand the prophet's fire struck the deep sorrows of his lyre. Hark! How each giant oak and desert cave sighs to the torrent's awful voice beneath. Over thee, O king, their 100 arms they wave. Revenge on thee in hoarser murmurs breathe. Vocal no more, since Cambria's fatal day, to high-born Hoyle's harp or soft Lelvian's lay. Now Gray shifts his focus from King Edward I to the last bard. The bard is standing on a high rock, which he compares with the brow, and the convoy river flows beneath him. The bard is wearing a furry robe and his eyes are exhausted. His beard and hair are unruly and float like a meteor in the troubled air. He shows his gratitude to the master, that is the god, for saving his life and sings a poem about how the giant oak trees and caves disrespect the torrent's voice and save him from him. The bard curses the brutal king as he silences all the Cambrian bards. They will come back with 100 arms to take revenge upon him. The stanza ends with a warning that the king will also suffer the extreme because he killed the innocent poet Hoyle and the king of Wales Lilwyn. The bard's curse continues with a vision of Wales rising against its conquerors with the maddening sound of war drums and the terrible array of battle. The bard predicts that the mighty chiefs of Wales will lead their people to victory and that the fiends of hell will join the battle on their side. This suggests that the bard sees the conflict as a struggle between good and evil, with the Welsh fighting for their cultural and spiritual survival. In stanza 3, he says, Cold is Cadwallow's tongue that hushed the stormy main. Brave Urien sleeps upon his craggy bed. Mountains, ye moan in vain. Modred, whose magic song made huge Pilman bow his cloud topped head, on dreary Avon's shore they lie. Smeared with gore and ghastly pale, far, far aloof the affrighted ravens sail. The famished eagle screams and passes by. Dear lost companions of my tuneful art, dear as the light that visits these sad eyes, dear as the ruddy drops that warm my heart. You died amidst your dying country's cries. No more I weep. They do not sleep on yonder cliffs, a grisly band. I see them sit, they linger yet, avengers of the native land. With me in dreadful harmony they join and weave with bloody hands the tissue of their line. Now the poet is reminiscing about his fellow bard and how much potential they had. He first remembers Cadwallow, a talented poet who could stop the storm with his poetry. He recalls the brave poet Urien, who is now sleeping in the mountains. The mountains also mourn his death, but everything is in vain now. He then remembers Modred, the magical poet, who can make the highest mountain, Plimon, bow before him with his poetry. All these great poets are now lying on the shore of the river Avon. Their blood-stained bodies become pale, and even the crows are afraid to come near. The ravenous eagles also pass away without eating them. The bard is now crying for his companions. He says that these are the lost companions of his art, and his eyes cannot help getting teary, leaving his heart aching for their presence. These three poets he mentioned, along with the other innocent bards executed by King Edward I, are not sleeping, and for that reason he will not weep more. They are planning to avenge the brutal King Edward I for the massacre he did with the Cambrian bards. The stanza ends with the poet's desire to join in this endgame of King Edward I by weaving the death robe for those bloody hands. Now part 2, stanza 1. Weave the warp and weave the woof, the winding sheet of Edward's race. Give ample room and verge enough the characters of hell to trace. Mark the year and mark the night when Severn shall re-echo with affright the shrieks of death through Berkeley's roofs that ring. Shrieks of an agonizing king, she-wolf of France with unrelenting fangs that tearest the bowels of thy mangled mate. From thee be born, who over thy country hangs the scourge of heaven, what terrors round him wait. Amazement in his van with flight combined, and sorrow's faded form, and solitude behind. Thomas Gray presents a vivid and powerful image of the downfall of Edward's race. The warp and woof refers to the threads used in weaving. Here the poet is weaving the winding sheet of Edward's race, which means that he is symbolically preparing for their death. The poet urges the readers to give ample room and verge enough to the characters of hell. The poet then asks the readers to mark the year and mark the night, which creates a sense of foreboding and urgency. Something terrible is about to happen, and the reader must be aware of it. The following lines focus on the death of the king. The poet describes the shrieks of death that will echo through Berkeley's roofs. The poet then introduces she-wolf of France and describes her as having unrelenting fangs. The she-wolf of France is asked to give birth to a son who will be the scourge of heaven. The stanza ends with a description of the terrors that will surround this son. Amazement, flight, sorrow, and solitude will all be his companions. Stanza 2. Mighty victor, mighty lord, low on his funeral couch he lies. No pitying heart, no eye afford a tear to grace his obsequences. Is the stable warrior fled? Thy son is gone, he rests among the dead. The swarm, that is thy noontide beam, were born, gone to salute the rising morn. Fair laughs the morn, and soft the sapphire blows, while proudly riding over the azure realm, in gallant trim the gilded vessel goes. Youth on the prow and pleasure at the helm, regardless of the sweeping whirlwind sway that hushed and grim repose expects his evening prey. Now the bard shifts the focus to Edward II and addresses him as the mighty lord, the mighty victor. Though the king has so much power, he is now lying dead on his couch, and no one is there to shed tears for him or mourn his loss. The bard says that Edward III, son of Edward II, will die before him and lie among the dead. Then the bard asks what happened with the people who were with the wealthy king, and answers that those people have left to pay homage to the new king Richard II. The bard describes a new bright morning, and with the morning there is a new ship proudly rising on the azure sea. On the front part of the ship there is youth, and on the back there is pleasure mingled up with each other to make the time better. The sea is very much calm, but in reality it is violent. Though the ship is unable to look for danger in its silence, the sea is quietly waiting for its evening prey. The danger he was warning about was a series of wars like the Hundred Years' War, Peasants' Revolt, etc., which started in the reign of Richard II. Stanza 3. Fill high the sparkling bowl, the rich repast prepare. Reft of a crown, he yet may share the feast, close by the regal chair. Fell, thirst, and famine scroll. A baleful smile upon their baffled guest. Heard ye the din of battle bray, lance to lance and horse to horse. Long years of havoc urged their destined course, and through the kindred squadrons mowed their way. Ye towers of Julius, London's lasting shame, with many a foul and midnight murmur the fed. Rever his consort's faith, his father's fame, and spare the meek usurper's holy head. Above, below the rows of snow, twined with a blushing foe we spread. The Bristol boar is in infant gore, wallows beneath the thorny shade. Now, brothers, bending over the accursed loom, stamp we our vengeance deep and ratify his doom. The bard professes the future of Britain and the fate of the Welsh people. The stanza begins with an exhortation to celebrate, urging those present to prepare a rich feast. The reason for the celebration is the defeat of the English, who have long been the oppressors of the Welsh people. The next line refers to the defeated English king, who thought has lost his crown and power, is still alive and present at the feast. The bard mocks the fallen king by suggesting that he is now a guest at his table, forced to share in the revelry of his conquerors. The following lines introduce two unwelcome guests to the feast, thirst and famine, who scrawl a baleful smile at the defeated king. The bard describes a scene of violent conflict, with soldiers on both sides charging at each other with weapons drawn. The Towers of Julius refers to the Tower of London, which was built by Julius Caesar and later became a symbol of oppression and tyranny. The foul and midnight murder refers to the many bloody events that have occurred within its wall. The bard calls on the people of Britain to revere the English king's consort faith and his father's fame, suggesting that despite his defeat, the king is still worthy of respect. The final lines calls for revenge against the English king. The rose of snow and blushing foe refers to the English rose and its red color, which has long been associated with England. The Bristol boar in infant gore is a reference to the symbol of Wales and the bloody battle that took place between the two nations. The accursed loom may refer to the idea that the English have been weaving a plot against the Welsh for centuries, and the time has come for the Welsh to take their revenge. And now is the last part, part 3, stanza 1. Edward, lo, to sudden fate, weave we the woof, the thread is spun. Half of thy heart we consecrate. The web is wove, the work is done. Stay, O stay, nor thus forlorn. Leave me unblessed, unpitied here to mourn. In yon bright track that fires the western skies, they melt, they vanish from my eyes. But oh, what solemn scenes on Snowdown's height! Descending slow, their glittering skirts unroll, visions of glory sparing my aching sight. Ye unborn ages, crowd not on my soul. No more our long lost author we bewail. All hail, ye genuine kings, Britannia's issue hail. Now Thomas Gray foretells the doom that awaits the English soldiers who have killed his people. The bard addresses Edward I and says that the cloth of the bards started weaving to right all the curses his family would face is now complete. The next moment, he asks the spirit of his fellow bards who helped him to weave the cloth not to leave him alone to mourn. The bard asks what these slowly descending solemn scenes of the mountain Snowdon are, which he could not understand. The poet requests the vision of glory to spare his aching eyes and forbids it to weigh down his heart. The word long lost Arthur signifies the belief of the Welsh people that the dead King Arthur with the Tudor dynasty will resurrect someday and conquer his land. These lines highlight the transformative power of prophecy and tell the fate of nations can be shaped by the words of a single individual. Stanza 2. Girt with many a barren bold, sublime they starry frowns they rear, and gorgeous dames and statesmen old in bearded majesty appear. In the midst a form divine, her eye proclaims her of the Briton line. Her lion port, her ave commanding face, attempered sweet to virgin grace. What strings symphonious tremble in the air, what strings of vocal transport round her play. Hear from the grave, great Taliesin, hear, they breathe a soul to animate thy clay. Bright rapture calls, and soaring as she sings, waves in the eye of heaven her many coloured wings. Now Gray describes the haunting music of the Welsh bard as he foretells the downfall of Edward I and the triumph of Welsh independence. The first four lines set the stage for the arrival of the people in the palace. The bard adds a sense of grandeur and nobility to the appearance. Amid this gathering, a form divine appears. This figure is portrayed as having the attire of a British royal with a lion port and an ave commanding face. However, she is also described as having a sweet and graceful demeanor, which adds a touch of femininity to her powerful presence. This figure is likely a representation of Queen Elizabeth I, who is believed to have descended from the Welsh royal line of Cadwallader. The Divine Lady is also a symbol of the rise of the Tudor dynasty. The music that accompanies the Queen's appearance suggests a powerful and emotional musical performance, perhaps performed by the bards. The mention of the great Welsh poet Taliesin, who is called upon to hear the music from his grave, adds to the sense of the occasion's importance. The image of bright rapture, soaring and waving her many colored wings suggests a sense of spiritual ecstasy, as though the music is capable to lift the soul to new heights. Stanza 3. The verse adorn again, fierce war and faithful love, and truth severe by fairy fiction dressed. In buskined measures move, pale grief and pleasing pain, with horror tyrant of the throbbing breast, a voice as of the cherub choir, gales from blooming Eden bear, and distant warblings listen on my ear, that lost in long futurity expire. Fond impious man, thinkest thou, yon sanguine cloud, raised by thy breath, has quenched the orb of day. Tomorrow he repairs the golden flood, and warms the nations with redoubled ray. Enough for me with joy I see, the different doom our fates assign. Be thine despair and sceptred care, to triumph and to die are mine. He spoke, and headlong from the mountain height, deep in the roaring tide, he plunged to endless night. The Welsh bard prophesying the future of his nation and marks the end of the bard's speech and describes his dramatic suicide. The bard goes on to describe the power of music to evoke a sense of transcendence. He describes music as being capable of summoning the voice of the cherub choir and bringing the distant warblings of the past of life. The image of music carrying the sounds of Eden suggests that it has the power to transport the listener to a higher realm of spiritual awareness. The bard is talking about a man who will convey the voice of God. And here the poet is talking about the Eden Garden episode of Milton's Paradise Lost, where he will say what God says about the man of the earth. The bard is aware that this moment of inspiration is fleeting and will soon be gone. The bard then addresses Edward I, suggesting that human beings often fail to understand the true power and significance of the world around them. He says, the brutal king may think that he killed all the bards and all the poetry, but he is wrong. Finally, the bard plunges headlong from the mountain's height into endless night. After telling that everyone will be doomed in the assigned way, he jumps from the cliff into the river. This dramatic image suggests that his death is both a tragic and heroic act, evoking the image of a noble warrior falling in battle. It reinforces the idea that the themes of war, love, and truth are deeply connected to our sense of morality and that our deaths are an integral part of the stories we tell about ourselves. This is a beautiful poem written by Thomas Gray. If you have anything to add on from what I have said, please write it in the comment box. Like the video, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe. Thank you.